Don't forget to like the video. Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe to stay updated with our latest stories. It was one of those late October afternoons, the kind where the sun hangs low and golden, slanting through the windows and making dust motes dance like tiny forgotten stars. I just poured myself a cup of tea, the cinnamon apple kind, that always made the kitchen smell like autumn's best intentions when the doorbell chimed. I wasn't expecting anyone, not really. My days had taken on a quiet rhythm since Michael passed a gentle cadence of routine that was both a comfort and a cage. Peeking through the curtains, I saw a familiar beat-up sitting parked by the curb. Carol's car, but it wasn't Carol who stepped out. It was her son, Leo, 19, lanky, with that endearing awkwardness that still clung to him, a reminder of the boy he'd been. Even as he stood on the cusp of manhood, he was juggling a stack of textbooks and what looked like a laptop back, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Sarah, hi," he called out a little hesitantly as I opened the door. His voice was deeper than I remembered from our last brief encounter at Carol's summer barbecue. "Leo, sweetheart." What a surprise. "Come on in, is everything all right?" My mind immediately jumped. To Carol, was she okay? He shuffled inside, his eyes scanning the living room. "Yeah, no. Mom's fine. She actually sent me. Said you wouldn't mind if I studied here for a bit. The house is chaos today. The plumber's there and my little cousins are visiting. You know how that goes." He gave a wry smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. Eyes so like Carol, so warm, intelligent brown. "Of course I don't mind at all. Leo, the more. The merrier, though. It's usually just me and the cat these days," I said, gesturing towards the old tabby Patches, who blinking imperiously from his throne on the armchair. "Make yourself comfortable. Kitchen table. Or the sunroom might be nice and quiet for you." "The sunroom sounds great." "Actually, thanks, Sarah. You're a lifesaver." He headed towards the back of the house, the place where the afternoon light was best. It was my favorite room, filled with plants and old wicker furniture, a bit shabby, but undeniably cozy. I followed him, carrying my tea can. "I get you anything? Tea, coffee. I think I even have some of those fancy sodas Carol likes." He dropped his load onto the glass-topped table with a thud. "Oh no. I'm good for now, thanks." Brought a water bottle. He unzipped his bag and started pulling out books, economics, a thick literature anthology, a dog-eared notebook. He looked so earnest, so serious, hunched over his academic armory. It brought upon to my chest a memory of my own son David at that age, though he'd been more inclined towards engineering manuals than poetry. "Well, holler if you need anything. I'll just be pottering around. Don't mind me." I settled into the old rocker in the corner with my tea and a magazine I'd already read twice, pretending to be absorbed, but finding my attention, drifting the silence in. The sunroom wasn't empty. It was filled with the soft scratch of his pen on paper, the occasional rustle of a turning page, the quiet hum of his laptop. It was a studious sound, a young sound, and it felt nice, different. The house often felt too quiet, the silence amplifying the absence of Michael's puttering his news radio, his laughter after. About an hour, I heard him sigh, a deep, frustrated sound. I glanced over. He was staring at his laptop screen, fingers hovering over the keyboard, eyes expression tight. "Everything all right, Leo?" I asked, gently. He jumped a little, as if he'd forgotten I was there. "Oh, I just this to say it's for my contemporary lit class, and I'm supposed to be analyzing postmodern themes and, well, it's complicated." He ran a hand through his already disheveled brown hair. "I think I'm just staring at it too hard. My brain's gone fuzzy writer's block." "Huh?" The old Emmy smiled. "Sometimes a fresh pair of eyes helps, or just talking it out. What's the topic, if you don't mind my asking?" "An old dinosaur." He chuckled, the tension easing from his shoulders a fraction. "It's not that it's about how contemporary narratives reflect societal anxieties. We're reading this really dense novel, and I'm trying to connect it to things like information overload and, I don't know, the general sense of uncertainty everyone seems to feel. uncertainty. I am mused, swirling the lukewarm tea in my cup. Yes, I suppose. There's a lot of that going around. Isn't there different kinds for different generations? Maybe. But it's always there. He looked at me, then really looked at me, his gaze surprisingly direct. What do you mean? What kind of uncertainties did your generation have? If you don't mind masking Sarah. It was a simple question, but it caught me off guard. It wasn't often that someone his age showed genuine interest in the perspectives of someone my age. Beyond polite listening, Carol and I talked for hours, of course, but this felt different. He wasn't just being polite. There was a genuine curiosity. In his eyes, I hesitated for a moment, thinking, well, when I was your age, it was the Cold War, the threat of nuclear annihilation hanging over everything. Different from today's worries, perhaps more singular, but terrifying all the same. Then there were economic recessions, anxieties about jobs. The future, something's changed, Leo. But that baseline worry about what's next, I think that's pretty timeless. He leaned back in his chair, absorbing that. So it's not just us then feeling like the world's a bit unmoored, not by a long shot, sweetheart. I offered him a small, reassuring smile. Every generation thinks they invented angst. Turns out it's a hand-me-down. He let out a short laugh, and the sound was warm, genuine. That's actually kind of comforting, too. He picked up his pen again, then paused. You know, my mom talks about you all the time. Says you're one of the wisest people she knows. I felt a blush creep up my neck. Oh, Carol's just being kind. We've known each other since before you were a twinkle. In her eye, that's all. We've seen each other through a lot of life. She said, you always know the right thing to say. He tapped his pen against his notebook, this essay. It's not just the themes. It's trying to find my own voice in it. You know, not just regurgitating what the professor wants to hear. The perennial student dilemma is, stood up, stretching my legs. Tell you what, why don't I make us a fresh pot of tea or coffee if you prefer? And you can tell me about this novel sometimes, just explaining it to someone outside the academic bubble. Can clear the cobwebs. No pressure to impress. Just talk. His face brightened. Really, you wouldn't mind? I don't want to bore you. Bore me, Leo? My biggest excitement today before you arrived was deciding whether to have Earl Grey or English breakfast. Trust me, a discussion about postmodern literature would be a thrilling diversion. He grinned a full, open smile, this time, and it transformed his face, making him look younger and somehow more hopeful. Okay, deal. And coffee would be amazing if it's not too much. Trouble, no trouble at all. As I went to the kitchen to grind the coffee beans, the rich aroma soon filling the air, I felt a lightness I hadn't experienced while it wasn't just the pleasant surprise of having company. It was Leo himself. There was a depth to him, a thoughtfulness that I hadn't fully appreciated before. He wasn't just Carol's son, the kid I'd seen grow up in snapshots. He was a young man grappling with big ideas, trying to find his place. And for some reason, he felt comfortable enough to share a little of that struggle with me. The afternoon, which had started like any other, suddenly felt imbued with a subtle current of anticipation, a sense that something more than just studying was happening here. An unexpected connection was forming, as delicate and surprising as the first crocus in spring, and I found myself looking forward to where our conversation might lead. The house didn't feel so quiet. Anymore, we sat in the sunroom. For the next hour, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingling with the scent of old books and autumn air. Leo, fueled by caffeine, and perhaps their leaf of an understanding ear, began to talk about the novel he was studying. It was a complex, sprawling thing, full of narrative tricks and unreliable narrators, the kind of book that made my head spin even in my college days. But as he spoke, his passion for the subject, his intellectual curiosity became infectious. He wasn't just summarizing the plot, he was wrestling with its idea, questioning the author's intentions, connecting the fictional anxieties to the real-world currents. He felt swirling around him and his peers, He spoke of the relentless pressure of social media, the curated perfection that made real life feel inadequate, the dizzying pace of technological change that seemed to render skills obsolete before they were even mastered. It's like he said, leaning forward, his hands animated, "We're all supposed to have a personal brand before we even know who we are. There's this constant performance, this need to project success and happiness, even when you're paddling like mad, just to stay afloat." I listened, truly listened, not just as Carol's friend, not just as an older woman offering a sympathetic ear, but as someone who recognized the truth in his words, even if the specifics of his generation's challenges were different from my own. I remembered my own youthful uncertainties, the pressure to conform to different expectations, the fear of not measuring up. "It sounds exhausting," I said quietly, when he paused for breath. He nodded, his shoulders slumping a little. "It is. Sometimes I just want tucked out. Go live in a cabin in the woods or something. But then what would I be opting out to, or from? The desire to escape the noise isn't." "New Leo," I said, thinking of Thoreau and countless others who had sought solace in simplicity. "But maybe it's not about escaping entirely, but about finding pockets of quiet, of authenticity. Within the noise, pockets of quiet," he repeated, looking out at the fading sunlight, painting the garden in hues of orange and purple. "Like this, I guess, coming here today. It's quiet, good. Quiet. I'm glad it feels that way," I said, my heart warming a little. "My home has always been a sanctuary for me. It's good to know it can be that for others, too." He turned back to me, his gaze thoughtful. "Mom says, you're a really good painter. She has that landscape you did of the coast hanging in her office. I'd look at it all the time. It's like you can feel the sea breeze coming off it." I was surprised he'd noticed it, let alone studied it. My painting had been a casualty of life's increasing demands. And then Michael's illness, the easels and canvases were stored in the attic, gathering dust and silence. "Oh, I haven't painted in years. Leo, life got in the way." "Why not?" He asked his question. Simple, direct, yet carrying no judgment. I hesitated. It was a question I'd asked myself many times. The answer always a mix of excuses and a deeper, unacknowledged sadness. It takes a certain kind of energy, a certain peace of mind, I suppose. And after Michael, well, the colors just didn't seem as bright anymore. He was silent for a moment, his expression softening with an empathy that belied his ears. "I'm sorry about your husband. Mom told me he was a great guy." "He was," I said, my voice a little thick. "He was my encore, and my biggest fan, especially when it came to my art." "Maybe," Leo said slowly, thoughtfully, "painting again wouldn't be about the colors being bright right away. Maybe it would just be about painting, about doing something you loved. Maybe the colors would come back on their own in their own time." His words, so simple, so earnest, struck a chord deep within me. It was as if he'd reached into a dusty, forgotten corner of my heart and gently brushed away some of the cobwebs. No one had spoken to me about my painting like that. In years, Carol would sometimes gently suggest to take it up again, but it often felt like another item on a to-do list, another expectation. Leo's words felt different, like an invitation rather than a prescription. "Perhaps. You're right," I said, a small, tentative smile. "Forming, perhaps the act of doing, is the important part, I think." So he said, "It's like this essay. I'm so worried about getting it right, about it being brilliant that I forget to just write, to explore the ideas. Maybe the brilliance, if it comes at all, is a byproduct of the exploration." We sat in comfortable silence for a few moments. The only sounds, the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall, and the distant murmur of traffic. The sun had dipped below the horizon now, and the sunroom was filled with the soft, hazy light of dusk. It felt intimate, a shared space of quiet reflection. "You know, Sarah," Leo said, his voice a little softer. "Now, I was kind of dreading coming over here today. Not because of you, obviously, but Because I felt like I was imposing and I was so stuck on this paper, I figured I'd just sit here and be miserable in a different location. I chuckled, glad I could provide a more scenic backdrop for your misery. No, it's not that, he said quickly. This has been really good. Talking to you, it's helped more than, I feel like I can actually tackle this thing now. He gestured towards his laptop, and not just the essay, other stuff too. I'm happy to hear that. Leo, truly. And there was a sense of connection, of mutual understanding that had blossomed in the quiet afternoon, unexpected and genuinely warming. It wasn't just him benefiting from our conversation. I felt it too, a stirring of something long dormant within me, a reminder that life could still hold surprises, still forge new and meaningful connections in the most unexpected of ways. He began to pack his books, the earlier tension in his movements, replaced by a more focused energy. Mom will be wondering where I've got to. I should probably head home soon. She'll want a full report on the plumbing disaster. I'm sure. Of course, I stood up as he did, thrive safely. And Leo? Yeah. He paused at the sunroom door, his silhouette framed by the dimming light. If you ever need a quiet place to study again, or just someone to bounce ideas off of, my door is always open. A grateful smile spread across his face. Thanks, Sarah, that means a lot. And hey, maybe next time I could see some of your paintings. The ones in the attic. My breath hitched almost imperceptibly. The attic. Those canvases held so many memories, so much of myself, that I had locked away. His request was bold, yet gentle. It wasn't a demand, but a flicker of genuine interest. Maybe I said, my voice softer than I intended. Maybe we could do that. He nodded, a sense of anticipation in his eyes that mirrored my own surprising flicker of it cool. Well, good night, Sarah. And thanks again for everything. Good night, Leo. It was my pleasure. I watched him walk down the hall and let himself out, the click of the front door echoing in a suddenly quiet house. But the silence felt different this time. It wasn't empty. It was filled with their sonance of our conversation, with the warmth of an unexpected bond. I walked back to the sunroom and looked at the chair where he'd sat, the faint indentation still visible on the cushion. A 19-year-old boy, my friend's son, had come over to study, and somehow in the space of a few hours he had managed to unlock a part of me that had been closed off for years. He'd reminded me of the joy of shared ideas, of genuine human connection. He'd made me think about my art, not as a source of past pain, but as a future possibility. I'd walked over to the window, looking out at the darkening street. The streetlights hummed to life, casting pools of orange onto the pavement. I thought about those canvases in the attic for the first time in a long, long time. The thought of climbing, those stairs, of pulling back the dust sheets, didn't fill me with a sense of dread. Instead, there was a tiny, hesitant flutter of something else. Curiosity, maybe even a little bit of hope. Leo's visit, so ordinary on the surface, a turn into something quite extraordinary. It was an unexpected gift. A quiet revelation on an autumn afternoon, and I knew with a certainty that settled deep in my bones that something inside me had shifted, nudged awake by the earnest questions and gentle understanding of a young man on the cusp of his own life's journey. The quiet of my house no longer felt like an ending, but a space holding potential, waiting for new colors. The following week passed in a blur of one accustomed activity. Though most of it was internal, Leo's visit had stirred. Something in me, like a stone dropped into a still pond, the ripples spreading outwards, touching parts of my life I'd thought were settled and quiet. I found myself thinking about his questions, his observations about the world, his gentle encouragement about my painting. It was as if a window had been opened in a stuffy room, letting in fresh air and a different perspective. I didn't hear from Leo directly, but Carol called midweek, her voice bubbling with its usual cheerful energy. Sarah, I don't know what you said to that boy of mine, but he's been like a different person. He actually finished that dreadful essay without his usual last-minute panic. And he's been, I don't know, more thoughtful, less angsty. He even offered to help his father clean the gutters on Saturday. Miracles still happen. Apparently, I laughed a genuine light-hearted sound. Oh, I didn't do much. Carol, we just talked. He's a good kid. Very insightful. Insightful is one word for it. Carol said he also mentioned. He had a really great conversation with you. Said you were a lifesaver. And then he asked me about your old art studio in the attic if he still had your supplies. That surprised me. He's never shown much interest in art beyond what he has to study. Forkless. My heart gave a little flutter. He did mention my painting. Yes, well, are you going to get them out? Carol's voice was hopeful. She'd been gently nudging me towards my art for years. I'm thinking about it, I admitted. And the admission itself felt like a significant step before Leo's visit. The answer would have been a firm if regretful. No. Now it was a hesitant possibility. The attic, it had been Michael's domain, mostly his workshop, his storage space, for things he couldn't bear to part with. After he was gone, I'd barely ventured up. There it was too full of him, of his absence. My art supplies were tucked away in a far corner under old sheets, a silent testament to a part of my life I'd thought was over a few days later on a crisp Saturday. Morning, I found myself standing at the bottom of the attic stairs, a sense of trepidation mixed with a strange sort of excitement. It felt like archaeology, excavating a forgotten part of myself. The air up there was cool and still smelling faintly of old wood and dust. Sunlight streamed in through the single dormer window, illuminating floating particles like tiny diamonds. I located the corner where my supplies were stored. Hesitantly, I pulled back a sheet there. They were stacks of canvases, some blank, some with half-finished sketches, boxes of oil paints. The tubes dried and cracked in places, but many still viable, bundles of brushes, their bristles stiff but familiar. My old wooden easel folded, compact. A wave of emotion washed over me. Nostalgia. Sadness, but also a surprising surge of affection. It was like finding a long-lost friend. I picked up a tube of Caruan blue, Michael's favorite color. He'd always said it reminded him of the summer sky. Just after dawn, a faint smile touched my lips. Maybe Leo was right. Maybe the act of doing was the important part. Maybe the colors would come back. I didn't bring anything downstairs that day. It was enough to have reacquainted myself with that lost part of my world. But the seed had been planted. The thought of painting no longer felt like a burden, but a quiet invitation. The following Tuesday, just as I was finishing my lunch, the doorbell rang. It was Leo again this time. He wasn't laden with textbooks. He had a small, slightly battered-looking sketchbook in his hand, and a hopeful expression on his face. "Hi, Sarah," he said a little shilly. I was in the neighborhood. Mom had a dentist appointment nearby. I know you said your door was always open. Is now an okay time?" "Lo, of course. It's okay. Come in, come in." I stepped back, a genuine warmth spreading through. At the sight of him, no economics crisis. Today, he grinned. "No, mercifully. Actually, I remembered you saying. Maybe I could see your paintings? The owns in the attic if you're not busy?" "That is, and if you still feel like it," his request, so direct yet so respectful, disarmed any lingering hesitation I might have had. It felt less like an intrusion and more like a shared curiosity. "I was just up there a few days ago, actually," I confessed, reacquainting myself with the dust bunnies. "Why don't we make a cup of tea? And then we can brave the ascent together." His eyes lit up. "That would be amazing, Sarah." "Thank you." Soon we were climbing the narrow attic stairs, me leading the way. The attic was just as I'd left it, shafts of sunlight cutting through the dimness. He led him to the corner where my art supplies were. "Well, here it is," I said with a slightly self-deprecating wave of my hand. "The graveyard of ambition, or perhaps just a very long pause." Leo didn't say anything at first. He just looked, his gaze slowly taking in the canvases, the paint boxes, the easel. He walked over to a stack of canvases leaning against the wall, and very carefully, as if handling ancient relics, turned the front one. Around it was an unfinished portrait of Michael, one I'd started years ago, capturing him in a moment of laughter, his eyes crinkling at the corners. I hadn't been able to look at it since he died. A lump formed in my throat. Leo stood before it for a long moment. "This is your husband, isn't it?" he asked softly. "Yes," I whispered. "That was Michael." "He looks happy," Leo said, his voice gentle. "You really captured something real in his eyes." Sarah even unfinished. His words were simple, yet they landed with profound comfort. He wasn't offering pity or platitudes. He was seeing the art, seeing Michael through my art and appreciating it. He moved on, looking at other canvases, a seascape from a long-ago trip to Maine, the waves rendered in thick impasto, a still life of sunflowers in a blue vase, their heads heavy, and golden, a few abstract pieces, experiments with color and form, that I'd almost forgotten. "These are incredible, Sarah," he said, turning to me, his face earnest. "Why did you ever stop? I mean, I know you said life got in the way, but this is a real gift you have." I leaned against an old wooden chest, feeling a warmth spread through me that had nothing to do with the attic's stuffiness. It's complicated, Leo. Part of it was time. Yes, but part of it, I think, was losing my confidence. The world is so full of talented people, it's easy to feel like your own efforts aren't good enough. "But who defines good enough?" he countered, his brow furrowed. "Isn't it about what it gives you, the process? What you said about my essay about just exploring the ideas, doesn't that apply to painting too?" He had a way of turning my own words back on me, making me see their broader implications. He was right. Of course, when I was painting regularly, it wasn't for accolades or gallery shows. It was for the quiet joy of creation, the absorption in color and light, the way it made me see the world differently. "You're wise beyond your ears, Leo," I said, shaking my head with a smile. "I just say what I see," he replied, a hint of a blush on his cheeks. He gestured towards the easel. "Would you ever, I don't know, set this up again, maybe just to try?" There it was, the gentle challenge, the quiet encouragement, looking at him, at his hopeful, expectant face, at the dusty canvases filled with the past. I was slowly beginning to reconcile with something. Shifted. The fear, the inertia that had held me captive for so long, began to recede, replaced by a fragile, tentative shoot of desire. "Maybe I will," I said. And this time the words felt more solid, more real. "Maybe I really will." He beamed a wide, infectious smile. "That's great, Sarah. Really great." He paused, then held up his own sketchbook. "You know, I dabble a bit myself. Just sketches, nothing serious. But looking at your work, it's inspiring. Can I see?" I asked, genuinely curious. He hesitated for a second, then nodded and opened the sketchbook. His drawings were surprisingly good. Quick, expressive sketches of people on the subway, studies of trees in the park, architectural details of old buildings. They had a raw energy, a keen observational quality. "Leo, these are wonderful," exclaimed. "You have a real eye for detail, for capturing a moment." He shrugged. "Pleased but modest thanks. It's just something I do to clear my head, like you, and your painting, I guess, or how it used to be." We spent another hour in the attic that afternoon, talking about art, about his sketches, about the play of light and shadow. He asked me about techniques, about colors, his curiosity, a gentle catalyst making me articulate things I hadn't thought about in years. It wasn't a lesson. It was a conversation, a sharing of passions. And as we talked, I felt an old familiar spark rekindle within me. The attic, once a place of sorrowful memory, began to feel like a place of quiet potential, a forgotten garden waiting to be tended when it was time for him to leave. He paused at the attic door. "Thanks for sharing this with me, Sarah. Heat was really special." "Thank you for asking, Leo." I said, mean it with all my heart. "You've given me a lot to think about." He smiled. "Let me know if you decide to set up that easel. I'd love to see what you create." As he left the house once again, fell quiet, but the quality of the silence was richer. Now imbued with the scent of old paints and new possibilities, Leo's visits were becoming more than just casual drop-ins. They were moments of genuine connection, of shared discovery. He, with his youthful perspective and earnest curiosity, was, unknowingly, helping me to rediscover a part of myself I thought I had lost forever, and I in turn hoped I was offering him a space where he felt seen and understood. A quiet harbor in the often turbulent seas of young adulthood. The unexpected friendship that was blossoming between us felt like a rare and precious thing, a quiet miracle unfolding in the ordinary rooms of my ordinary house, and the thought of painting again. Truly painting no longer felt like a distant dream, but a tangible, exciting prospect, waiting just beyond the threshold of my fear. The following Saturday, I did something I hadn't done in nearly a decade. I brought the easel downstairs. It felt momentous, setting it up in the sunroom, the same room where Leo and I had our conversations. Its wooden frame, a little scared and paint-splattered, seemed to soak up the afternoon light. A silent sentinel awaiting its purpose. I cleaned the old palette, sorted through the tubes of paint, the familiar scent of linseed oil filling the air. A perfume of forgotten creativity. It was a slow, deliberate process, each action a small step back towards a part of myself I was cautiously, hopefully reclaiming. I didn't paint that day, or the next. The easel stood empty, a gentle invitation rather than a demand, but its presence changed the room. Changed the way I felt when I sat there with my morning coffee. It was a promise Leo came by the next week. Ostensibly to borrow a book. Carol had mentioned I owned a collection of Robert Frost poems. I suspected it was also an excuse to see if I acted on our conversation in the attic. When he saw the easel standing in the sunroom, a wide, delighted grin spread across his face. "You did it," he exclaimed, his voice full of genuine pleasure. "Sarah, that's fantastic. Well, I set it up, at least I said, feeling a warmth spread through meat. His enthusiasm, that's the first step, I suppose, still summoning the courage to actually put brush to canvas. The first step is always the hardest," he said, his eyes shining. "What are you going to paint first?" I shrugged a little, overwhelmed by the question. I have no idea, it's been so long. It feels like learning to speak again. After a long silence, don't think about it too much. He advised with that surprising wisdom he sometimes displayed, just let it happen. What feels right. He walked over to the window, looking out at my small, slightly overgrown garden. The last of the autumn roses were still clinging to their branches, their petals, a deep, velvety crimson. Those roses are beautiful. The light on them right now is perfect. I looked where he was pointing. He was right. The late afternoon sun touched their pals with a fiery glow, casting long, soft shadows. It was a simple scene, yet it held a quiet beauty. Suddenly an image formed in my mind, not just of the roses, but of the feeling. They evoked a fragile persistence, a beauty that endured even as the season turned towards winter. Maybe, I said slowly, thoughtfully, maybe the roses. And so, with Leo as my quiet, encouraging witness, I found an old canvas, a small square one, and placed it. On the easel, I squeezed dabs of paint onto my Plet crimson rose madder. Sap green, a touch of yellow ochre. My hand trembled slightly as I picked up a brush. It felt foreign, yet deeply familiar. Leo pulled up a chair not too close to be intrusive, but near enough to offer silent support. He didn't talk, didn't offer advice. He just sat, his own sketchbook open in his lap occasionally, making a soft pencil stroke. His presence was calming, a steady anchor. In my sea of nerves, I started tentatively sketching the rough shapes of the roses with a thinned wash of burnt umber. My hand felt clumsy at first, the movement stiff, but gradually, as I focused on the flowers, on the play of light and shadow, something began to flow. The critical voice in my head, the one that whispered of inadequacy and failure, began to quiet, down, replaced by a deep concentration, an absorption in the act of creation itself. Hours seemed to pass in that sun-drenched room, though the clock on the wall told a different story. The light shifted, mellowing as the afternoon wore on. I worked slowly, carefully mixing, colors layering strokes, trying to capture not just the likeness of the roses, but their essence. There were moments of frustration, of course, when a color wouldn't behave, or a line felt wrong. But there were also moments of pure, unadulterated joy when a brushstroke landed just right, when a color mix sang, when the image on the canvas began to resonate with the vision in my mind. Leo remained a quiet presence, occasionally looking up from his own sketching to watch me. A small, encouraging smile on his face. There was no pressure, no expectation, just a shared sense of creative immersion. It was an intimacy of a different kind, a communion of souls engaged in the silent language of art. As the light began to fade, I finally stepped back from Thiesel, my arm aching, my fingers smudged with paint, but my heart full. The painting wasn't a masterpiece. It was small, a little hesitant in places, but it was mine, and it was finished. The roses on the canvas glowed with a soft inner light, their crimson petals vibrant against the muted greens and browns of the background. They felt alive. "Sarah," Leo said softly, his voice full of awe. "That's beautiful." I'd looked at him, then back at the painting, a slow smile spreading across my face. "It felt good, Leo, really good, like coming home. I knew you still had it in you." He said, his eyes shining with pride, as if my small triumph was somehow his as well. And in a way, it was his belief in me. His gentle encouragement had been the catalyst. "Thank you," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for waking up the painter in me again." He just smiled, that warm, open smile that always seemed to reach his eyes. "Anytime, Sarah. What are friends?" For friends, the word resonated in the quiet room, an unlikely friendship perhaps, spanning generations and different life experiences. But a true friendship nonetheless, forged in shared conversations, mutual respect, and now in the shared joy of creation. That afternoon, something more than just a painting had been brought to life. A part of me long dormant had reawakened. The colors, as Leo had predicted, were starting to come back. Not just on the canvas, but in my life. The house no longer felt like a repository of old memories and quiet grief. It felt alive again, filled with the scent of paint, the warmth of friendship, and the promise of new beginnings. The unexpected visit from my friend's son had turned into an unexpected gift, a journey of emotional discovery that had led me back to myself, to a passion I thought was lost forever. And as I looked at the small painting of the autumn roses, I knew this was just the beginning. There were more canvases to fill, more colors, to explore, more life to live and to paint. And I had a feeling my young friend Leo would be there, cheering me on every step of the way. The connection we had found was a quiet, steady flame illuminating a path forward I hadn't known existed.